Episode 14 of Cape Conscious Media's Edutainment podcast. Yeah, the lights are on. And the reason why we started so early today, it's 6:30. We normally start at about 9 o'clock. Is because there's load shedding, and it's our topic of the day. It's the energy crisis. We have a special guest in studio who's going to inform us and tell us about the nitty-gritty about what's happening, man. What's happening? A lot of frustration out there. Welcome to the show. Thanks. Robert Lewis. Can I just call you Robert Lewis, or you would like to call by your full?
You can call me Dav.
Dav.
I got rid of the ID.
I got you. Welcome to the show, brother.
David Robert Lewis is my byline.
Yeah, it sounds like a James Bond name. It has like a, like the Energy Day James Bond.
It's got that kind of allure because, underground. I was part of the underground back in the day.
I got you.
Check. So
yeah.
Now I'm advocating energy revolution on the grassroots level.
Yes.
Community, microgrids, and cooperatives.
Mm-hmm. So you recently started the MECC. Would you like to first give us the acronym and give us a rundown on what the MECC is?
Well, I've always wanted to be the MEC, actually. No, I'm the MECC, Muizenberg Electricity Crisis Committee. Look, it is a crisis. It's very serious, it's impactful, and it's destroying people's lives.
Sure.
So we do need to step up, and what's crazy is that we're quite far behind where the rest of the world is, and so let's just look at the issues to do with cooperatives in our backyard.
So when you say cooperatives, number one, what you mentioned, you said we're far behind. Just before we go into the cooperative, what does that mean? Far behind? I know we're far behind, and I think we were far behind for quite a while, but it seems like we're going stage 2, stage 4, stage 6. I mean, people are we far behind, or
we've been misled. We've been taken down the garden path of consumerism, and expecting to be essentially clients of the state, expecting government to deliver services. And governments are notoriously inefficient allocators of capital, and they're even worse when it comes to delivery of goods and services. You don't always, you don't expect government to supply you with your basic goods. And there's a lot one can say about issues to do with the South African state and Eskom and the history of energy in this country, which is why I brought my book into the studio, Restoring the Land. I've written about this quite extensively.
Could it just maybe show it to the...
There it is.
Restoring the Land.
Yeah, this was the book that got pulped by the apartheid state.
Wow. And when was that book published?
1991.
Oh wow, my year of birth.
Right. So I've got a chapter here, Access to Energy.
Yeah. Read us some.
Let's get it. Where is it? Access to Power.
So you've been doing this for, I mean, you're an energy guy from the year I was born. So you knew the issue was there that time already?
Well, I'm one of the founders of the environmental justice movement in South Africa. Okay. So I was part of you could say it was the first wave of green revolt.
Wow.
In the system, like was on the coattails of the anti-apartheid movement, and that's why we ended up with Sustainable Development, Article 24 in the Constitution, as a result of those campaigns that were birthed in the late 80s. So, my involvement with Cape Town Ecology Group and led to my becoming one of the founders of Earth Life Africa. My problem child, right? I'm a bad parent, so I could tell you why that is and what happened, but I think let's just cut to the chase and get to issues to do with energy.
Yes.
When I wrote this chapter, Eskom had an oversupply of energy.
Wow. Before they were supplying the other South African or our Southern African countries?
It was an oversupply of energy and under delivery. So we get energy from Cora Bassa in Mozambique, and we've got this backbone of an energy grid. So the state essentially took up this, it's like a socialized energy delivery system, very centralized, very cumbersome, and it's cost a lot of money. And unfortunately, the projects that were birthed after the democratic rise of democracy have, a lot of that money has been wasted on miscalculations and bad decisions. So just to give you an idea of what happens when the grid begins to fail. Well, we've got these peaking gas cycle plants that have burned through 7.7 billion rand in 6 months.
The last 6 months?
That was 1 6-month period. That was, I've got that fact, the stat from that.
7.7 billion.
7.7 billion rands worth of diesel. And that's why when the president says his hands are tied, literally, it's because there is no money to service the system. It's that's money that would have been spent on repairs. Yeah. And a lot of analysts, everyone's got a slightly different take on what should be done and what is wrong with the system. But really, my criticism comes as a consumer, as a citizen, as a person living in my community, and primarily, I think one has to ask the question: so what can I do for my community? Right? I don't care what government has failed us, and expecting them to deliver on the next round of promises. Because remember, every time there's a grid failure, there's a new round of promises. They put Band-Aid on the system, and they're promising, they're spending more money, and it's a fantasy of an illusion, a mirage that never arrives, because the efficient, cheap electricity system doesn't exist. The 18% tariff increases that we can't get out of because of the bond market, where Eskom has sold our future, right? And we cannot get out of that bond market. The minute we went down that road,
had to be paid back.
It's got to be paid back. 160 billion rands worth of bonds, right?
And this is all on record, eh?
This is
all these figures.
If you go to the Eskom website, there's a section there, and you can have a look at those bonds.
Okay, so it's public information.
They're all ranked and rated, and they will have a income generating face value. And then there's the Saudi bonds, which are like the other 160 billion.
Algorithms are picking us up now. We're saying all the big words.
Right. So what is that? Like I was looking today, like, where are they? They're not on the website. They're not referred to on the balance sheet, but they're part of this 400 billion rand debt.
Wow.
Right. So you could sort of do some maths. You could take that 400 billion that we know Eskom owes, less the 160 billion rand bonds that they have told people about, and you can kind of get a figure out of that. It's what,
340?
Yes, something like that. So that's 340 billion. That's basically because if you in Islam, you understand that you don't pay interest, right? Unfortunately, coming up with a different system doesn't solve that problem. It delays the issue. It creates a situation where you've ceded control over future assets based on the future supply of electricity. So we have sold.
That's good.
We've sold 340 billion rands worth of assets to a third party.
That's not going to be charging us interest, but that in the future would have some form of say.
They get income from it's like income. Future earnings as shareholders. They're shareholders in our system. So this whole privatization, anti-privatization, I'm sorry, Kasati looks ridiculous. The workers' movement has failed us. And we've failed because we went for the centralized energy promises of the current administration and previous administrations. We need to get back to basics. We need to get back to the grassroots. We need to get back to people's power, and we need to return the power to the people.
Does that start with innovation?
It starts with realizing that the small community build projects that you can do, there's interventions that don't cost a lot of money. There are a lot of DIY projects. Do it with other projects. Do it. I love DIY, but I don't want to do this alone. I want to do this with people, and I want to cooperate. I want to do it in a community, voluntary. Self-reliance as a community, I think, is important in terms of building up resilience. So when I talk about resilience, you got to ask me. So what are you putting on the table, right? Well,
and this is obviously through MECC.
Yeah, I'm the MECC, right?
Yeah,
right. You the MC, right? So MECC, so there's two vectors. There's the first of all, cooperatives. What are cooperatives? And second,
just a brief description.
Right. Well, there's a Cooperatives Act, an enabling piece of legislation. A cooperative, if you want to understand that, it's quite prevalent in agriculture. In fact, one of the oldest cooperatives is KWV, and everyone drinks brandy, right? So we have a history of cooperation that isn't about commercial exploitation of others. It's about doing it through mutual aid, mutualism on a voluntary basis, where you
is it for collective benefit?
Collective benefit societies, yes. Whether it's a CBO or different ways you can look at this, but KWV, right? So it's a bunch of farmers get together, and we collectively using labor to get our grapes in, harvest our produce, and we're producing a product that we understand that if we pool our resources, we can benefit by getting that product to the market. So primarily, the Cooperatives Act is geared towards those kind of endeavors. Now, you'll be pleased to know that there's a Gubega, there's a very small energy cooperative. I was looking around to see, are there any other instances of, like, has someone else done this? And some guys in Gubega.
Is that Gubega PE?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. When people change the name, like, is it still the same place?
Yeah.
Like, you go there, like, what? Like, they've changed all the signage, I guess.
Yeah.
Is it a different experience?
Was that your use case?
Well, not really. It's an idea of what has been done. So it kind of proves that people are doing it.
Okay.
And in that instance, it's a 1 kilovolt system, a PV system that they've put on a rooftop of a carport.
Wow.
And it's plain, it's tiny, 1 kilovolt, right? But for that community, that's quite enabling, and it's created this situation where they're, like, a lot of academics are kind of writing about them, and
it's creating interest.
It's creating interest. And remember, there's a European fund, and there's a climate fund that's come out of the COPs, these congresses of the parties, conferences of the parties, and there's a lot of money that's looking for small projects exactly like that. So it's really a challenge to communities, and so me embarking on this program of action with my MECC, we first of all looking at what are the other our potential partners, or are there people out there who've done this before who can assist us? And they're very, very few. If you look overseas, you'll find that there are 400 plus similar cooperatives in the UK, and over 800 in the US, and similarly in Germany, over 800.
Wow. So they have hundreds and we have not even 10.
This is what gets me. I actually gave a presentation about 10, 15 years ago at the Social Movements in Durban.
You look like you have that look on your face, like, I told you so.
I told you so. I was like,
and they didn't listen, or like, what was your message, and what was the feedback generally? Because it wasn't at this stage, but you could obviously see it was declining, and I'm sure you anticipated that this was going to be the outcome.
When you try to share information, you're looking for support, and when you don't receive that support, and all you get is criticism from the toxic left, right? Like, who are you? Why are you not black? What are you selling us? we don't want this. This is European technology. We want our own tech. So obviously my presentation was coming from the wrong place. It was just stuff that I'd taken off the internet. I was trying to interest people in cooperatives, and I went about it. It's obviously my fault, right? So I'm the wrong
for not understanding your target audience, or not understanding.
I didn't understand the room. I thought people would want to build their own power stations and have virtual power, and download their own volts, and so from the via an app that they could distribute in their village and have a system of shared resources, that was renewable and climate friendly. I thought that was what people wanted. Boy, was I wrong.
Sure.
Right. What people wanted was sheltered employment in very large mega projects that create like these mega coal builds, where the engineering just went south at the same time that the motivation of what they were doing was completely, they were going down the wrong road.
Would you call it political engineering?
It's one of the reasons why academics shouldn't get involved in politics. Right? They shouldn't be on committees.
But don't they have the influence though? Because you went there and you knew, I'm sure you knew your audience. You're saying that now, it's like, I knew these guys wouldn't, but you went there and you presented, and you knew you're probably going to be ridiculed, and you knew that, they're going to throw politics at you, but you still went. So as the academics or the people that have insight, is it time for our voices to be louder? Is it time for our voices to be smarter? Is it time for cooperatives? I'm sure everyone has some form of solution, but...
So let's just start afresh. Let's just put the past behind us. Let's move on and say, let's make a proposal. We're living in a time of cooperatives and cooperation, and that's the collective future that we want for our country. Let's just put aside and say we've been done in this ESCOM thing just doesn't work, and the government didn't step up, and we've got to do it for ourselves. So what do we need to do? So the modest proposal really is, so we set up a cooperative in terms of the Cooperatives Act, the board and what have you, manifesto.
Micro cooperatives in each area. And is your cooperative the first one that you want to build to show a case study, and then have that system then scaled across different areas across South Africa? Is that what you're proposing? Or are you proposing at everyone, at what scale?
Everyone should just do it.
Okay.
Right? Let 1,000 cooperatives bloom.
Okay.
And it's 1,000 energy cooperatives. And because we're doing it, we're going to come up with our own solution, and we'll come up with our own vibes, and Muizenberg's like a surfer, yoga, hippie,
it's innovative space,
and we'll do it according to those principles. But there's nothing stopping other communities from getting it together and doing it in their way, how they want to build a microgrid. So the thing about microgrids, and this is quite important, let's just think what that means, right? Well, first of all, we got to understand what the macro grid is, right? The macro grid is everything that's out there. That's ESCOM, that's the city. Okay. The micro grid is your own home, right? That's what you've got when you look at your DB board, and you've got wires coming from the DB board that power your house and all your appliances, right? And you can have a small home. It doesn't have to be a lot of rooms. You could have a one-room bedroom, but essentially the microgrid is your power system that you've got. And usually it's AC/DC. It's usually running at 220 volts, but that's not necessarily the case. It could run at 12 volts. You could have 24 volts, right? So we're looking at a microgrid. Now and then, when you look at a community microgrid, you're looking at a topography of a system that is where there's a central control system, where there's a place where it couples with the macrogrid.
Okay. So
that it could act as a backup when the macrogrid switches off and you load shedded, right?
The microgrid goes on.
The microgrid comes on, right?
It's like a timer. It will react when it goes off, like a generator when it goes on.
Yes. So the issue of how to engineer that and what needs to be done. At the moment, we don't have the capacity to roll that out. That would be fantastic, right? And of course, you need to get an engineer, and you need to look at the topography of your microgrid. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, we're going to capacitate ourselves. So while we're doing the research and trying to get the skills and getting the enabling system, because remember, we want a community tariff, right? We want to have a microgrid that comes on with our energy. Where does that energy come from? Was it energy that was purchased from the city? Is it energy that was bought from Eskom? Or is that energy from, all the Lanis who got their solar panels up before us?
Some of them.
Who
have excess.
Have excess energy.
Yeah, and then we can assist them as well.
Right.
So we can secure it for them.
Right, because it's all very well for the mayor of Cape Town to say, we're opening up our system. There's an input tariff, and we'll pay you for your electricity. That's all very nice.
That sounds good.
But do you know where that electricity is going? Right? It's all very well to put energy into the system, but if your neighbors can't actually afford energy, what's the point? So we want a community tariff structure that recognizes our capital expenditure. I was having this discussion with you while we were coming on the field, right?
It was good, by the way. Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
Yes. The thing is, right, the city's expecting people to invest in PVs and renewables, and then to someone just put the units,
power back.
Put the power back so they can send it back to us. That's saying, I must grow my bananas so that you can make a profit off my produce
by selling it back to me.
There's something this verkeerd, right? There's something wrong. It doesn't add up.
Yeah. On the Cape Flats, we say that's Nwatas that.
Right. That doesn't work in the Cape Flats. It doesn't work in Khayelitsha. That doesn't work for a lot of Brasa, okay? Right. It might work in Constantia. That makes sense in Constantia. I think the very large estate. You've got a lot of power.
A lot of space.
You sell it, and all you're interested in is your bank balance, right? How many units did you sell? At what price point did you get the return on your investment? But for the average person with a small PV system, we're talking about a big Muizenberg battery, right? And how would we construct that, and what would we do about it? So before we get there, we have a plan. The plan is that we're going to go for an 18650 battery project. There are quite a few of them, where they're readily available open source PCBs that we can print, get them made in the East because they're a lot cheaper. Bring them into the country and then populate those PCBs with our own batteries. And why 18650?
PCB?
PCBs, printed circuit boards.
Okay, and just give us an idea of what that looks like, for example, and how big it is, just so we can have some form of...
I got to bring the illustration and the visual reference points. And so you have a printed circuit board that's about that size or doubled up. And there are various designs, and the battery cells are pretty much the same height as this book, actually. But anyway, they're the cells that come in your laptop power packs, right?
Okay.
And you can recycle the packs. So there's a way of, we've got to scavenge, we've got to harvest, and we've got to then check the batteries to see what how much power can they hold, what they're rated at. And then you put that system into, you start building up battery packs. So the one project is a 12 volt battery pack. The other one is a 25 volt battery pack. And on that basis, you can pretty much figure out, so how many of those packs in parallel series would you need to build like a 220 volt or 250 volt system, right?
That would power how many devices?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's all based on kilowatt hours.
Okay.
Right. And there's a bit of maths involved. We've got all that information on the Muizenmesh, where we've got a media wiki up and running with the battery projects there. If you're welcome to register. You don't have to live in Muizenberg to use the Muizenmesh. right? You can access it via the internet, muizenmesh.coza.
I think Nantel will pull it up for us. Muizenmesh. Mesh.
Yeah, so internet,
Muizenmesh.
local community internet infrastructure.
Okay. Muizenmesh.
SH.
Yeah.
.coza.
.coza, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you briefly want to take us
you
while
need a
Nantel
dot-
is
you need
searching?
a-
There we
there
go.
we go.
That's the one. Do you want to take us through it while Nantel's on the screen? Wow,
so
looks
that's
good.
That's Muizenmesh with our particles. And if you just click on the wiki, it looks nice, eh?
Yeah, just on wiki then, Nantel, on the top right.
Yeah, you'll go to the. Can you see what it says wiki? Yes,
There we go.
Yes.
Okay.
This is so cool. I actually should have done this right at the beginning. I
There we go.
forgot about this. All right. Okay, so that's our wiki, and then there's a page there, MECC 18650 battery project. If you go there,
You're just going to click on it. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So you'll scroll down a bit. All right, that's the module that I was looking at over the weekend.
Cool. So that's how it looks.
Yep.
So we'll have, obviously, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 boards. And on each board, is it the right terminology that I'm using?
Yeah, they're all board PCBs.
Yeah.
Boards,
All
what do you wanna-
PCBs. And then we have a battery running across.
Yes.
And how many batteries are on one board for this one?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, quite a few.
Quite a few. But you can see there that in that project, the guys he salvaged, scavenged these things out of packs, and then he's got another project where you can build a tester.
Wow.
Which will make it a lot faster, because you've got to test each battery to see what the capacity is. Because the reason why people throw the packs away is that you'll have one of the batteries will die. That means the whole pack's gone. You got to buy a whole new battery pack, right?
What is the environmental implications of throwing away usable batteries? Can we afford to throw away batteries? Number one, obviously we could
Right.
use it, but what about the environmental effects?
Lithium ion. I'm not quite sure about that because they're not mercury batteries, but
But not good.
that's not good.
Okay. And now we need them.
Metal. It's got metal. Or you could maybe even reuse the metal. But it's lithium metal.
Okay.
And you've got so those ones there, they've all been scavenged, and it's got a battery tester. You can test the voltage. And
So what would this power? And would it be
this,
cheaper than?
Right, so this is like like your basic UPS system, which you can run a power tool.
Okay.
Right, which is fantastic if you got a workshop and you need to carry on working. Question is, could you weld using this? I don't think so, but it can run certain tools.
Let's talk practical for most people. Wi-Fi, laptop.
Yeah, that's your it would get your basic Wi-Fi and your router, your connection, your ISDN, your fiber cable connection. Sorry.
Okay. Fridge?
Not yet. No. If you scroll down a bit to the next project. Yeah. All right, there we go. Okay, this is the 25 volt system. So the first system, you'd have a 12 volt battery pack. This one you've got a 25 volt module that when you start stacking them, 10 times 10 is 250.
Is this times 10? This would be 10 on top of each other.
Yeah, you'd have 10 of these on top of each other.
250.
Right.
Then we're good to go, kind of. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the cost of this?
Well,
I know it's difficult because you said it depends on how much you buy, right?
No, here's the thing, right? So the main cost in the build is the battery itself. Everything else is relatively trivial. Even the PCBs are piss cheap. You can, the headers they're very cheap, especially if you buy them in bulk. Right. So if you get like 1,000 boards made, the price comes down quite a bit. right? So I haven't yet, there's an issue to do with scope and costing and sourcing of like what is the best solution. So we as a project we're going through like an appropriate tech solution stage where we want to capacitate you, Chad, your project. We want to give you some knowledge and hopefully build a pack that you could use
for my flat.
That'd be fantastic. If we could do that.
The first thing when I met with David last week, he was showing me this, like with the battery and everything else, and I was like, David, this is fantastic. Build me a use case. Show me. And then he explained, and yeah, like I'm very excited to see it. How many? From when you explain this to people, what is people's reactions generally? Because a lot of us are not really technically minded, and also we're so busy with life, and we think Eskom needs to solve our issues. So it doesn't come naturally when a lot of people see this. What have people's reactions been to you and your method, your suggestion?
I can only speak from my experience working with ObsFest, Hackfest, and building my own Arduino. This Arduino project. So, and that's a lot more difficult because it's a lot smaller, and you're putting SMDs onto a board.
Okay, so two things: the project you spoke about, what is that? And then what is the relative? What is
the connection? So there's when you put the build here, you'd need to do some soldering and some wiring and. But it's very simple. It's not difficult at all. For me, the difficulty was understanding the battery management system, right? Because you do need some kind of management system so that all the cells are evenly charged on the PCB. And that was the previous projects got that pat down, and I like what I see because it looks a lot simple. So what you need is a basic multimeter and a soldering iron and some solder.
Okay. What powers the batteries? Like when they run down?
So what you want to any battery pack, you've got to plug it in, right?
When the power's on.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then that's the interesting part that we want to obviously explore, because so if we're building a resilient community that's building its own battery packs, then we can get to the next level where we can start installations with, 5 residences come together and you have a common battery system.
A grid, a microgrid.
Microgrid, yes.
Yeah.
Where you have a certificate for that grid. It's been properly...
And compliance, so they're going to give us...
This is the thing, is that you're looking at a completely new place because people don't do this, right? You go to an estate, it's like the city's essentially given, like, imprinted, its map of how they want to turn us into loyal, law-abiding consumers who
dependent on their system
only. Yes,
that's not nice.
So their message is they're going to let IPPs into the system. They want people to generate who can afford to generate electricity to give them the electricity, but they're going to bill us for everything. They don't really want to. It's like a sort of a cartel. It's known as protectionism.
Yeah.
Right. They're protecting their turf, and that's the system that apartheid produced. Right. If you look at the history of Cape Town, there were these independent power plants that powered the city, which had several different tram systems, and that at some point under the national government, I think actually it was probably under the United Party, because I think Jan Smuts, I read something today that seems to suggest that he was the brainchild of Eskom. Put it this way, he started this debate in the House saying, we need a steel sector and we need a...
Sounds like Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah. He was Carnegie.
Carnegie.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of American Carnage.
Carnage. It's like...
slaughtered. Right.
It's like that singer Chuck Migonet.
Right. So let's just kind of understand history. We've gone through a period that started off with private power into a sort of a socialized power, mega centralized system. But let's understand that where we've come to is it's only right that history starts to repeat itself, that we go through a period of cooperatives. We go through a period of essentially Eskom ends up with creating breakaway. The AfriForum announced their project over the weekend, which is horrendous, by the way. Like putting a fission reactor in your living room is not a solution to anything.
So just give us some feedback on.
Okay, so I was around. I returned to Earth Life Africa, my problem child, and I got involved as an ordinary member, and I got them to oppose and shut down the PBMR program. Barbara Hogan eventually threw in the towel, right? That's you interviewing the person who was part of that protest action to shut the PBMR down.
No pun intended on shutdown, eh? Yeah. Or pun intended.
Well, I wasn't intending for us to be in this situation where we were load shedding, but look, PBMR, if you look at independent assessments, not assessments done by the industry that's selling the product, right? Not from the nuclear industry itself. The industry has a terrible habit of changing the annual allowable dose to suit its own emissions. So we can talk about cubic plant emissions. I've got a lot of data about that, but let's just look at PBMR. It's uranium pebbles that are coated like in this graphite. They've glued the graphite onto the uranium pebble that they create a fission system. There's a lot of problems with nuclear fission, is that it tends to shoot a lot of electrons around.
We'll call it radiation?
It's called radiation, right? So you got these beta and alpha particles. So how to talk about radiation and radionuclides, and how to understand why the fission produces metal that is radioactive, and what is that process? So for every fission that occurs, there's particles that are created out of that fission process where uranium-235 or whatever it is decays, right? It creates, there's heat involved. Once you have they're basically hot rocks. And we don't fully understand, and there's no one really that fully understands why these things happen, right? And I don't claim to be an expert, but what I can report to you is what I read. So I can report to you, for instance, that Muizenberg, as it stands, has a massive problem with tritium, tritiated water. Right.
Radio-inactive water?
It's radioactive water.
Active, not
right.
inactive.
So every fission, there's water in the plant and it gets radioactive. And
is that what happened in Japan with the leaks?
Well, Fukushima is slightly different kettle of fish because there was a meltdown.
Okay.
So what happens in Muizenberg, so there's tritiated water, and it's also thought that elemental tritium, that's the element of tritium itself, it scavenges through neutron absorption neutrons from the nickel in the plant to create something called cobalt-58, which is radioactive and has a half-life. I think it's about 30 odd years half-life. But that substance, so there was a scare in 2010 when 91 workers were contaminated with radioactive cobalt, and they didn't know where it came from. It was like suddenly there was dust in the plant, and they had picked it up because there's a process of when you leave the plant, you get they check to see whether you're radioactive. And obviously they're also monitoring workers because there's an annual allowable dose that's signed off by the minister. So there we are sitting in a committee meeting, the Department of Environmental Affairs, looking at nuclear issues. And the story, a bunch of workers arrive and they tell us the story. And I'm like gobsmacked, like, what? You mean there was a accident at Muizenberg and like nobody told us, and it still hasn't made the front page of the Cape Times? And why is that? It was a mystery, and we only solved it about 2 years ago.
Wow.
And the reason we solved it was that a friend of mine is a IT person, and his daughter is studying chemistry, and I'm telling her the story, and I'm realizing that I don't actually have the answers. And I'm like, hang on, I got to find out what would possibly create cobalt-58. Where would it come from? What would be a potential source? And as I was doing the research and narrowing it down to that it's obviously related to nickel, right? I found a briefing from the South African Atomic Energy Company that actually it's all there. It's like they actually were telling us this all along, time. But no one was reading the right part of didn't get the memo, just didn't go through. Like so the newsletter was, we've got some certain effluents, certain things coming out of our plants, and one of them happens to be X, right? And we think it's because of why, right? It's the tritium is scavenging, absorbing the nutrient absorption, creating fission products. And there are a lot of stuff that comes out of the cesium-137 and a whole bunch of nasties that end up in the wheat, dairy, shellfish. And then here's the thing, right? So AfriForum are like, there's such a thing as background radiation, right? There's radiation everywhere.
Cell phones are give you. I don't have it on me now, but are we an EMT, electromagnetic transmitter device? It's called argonite, and apparently that pushes it away. So I know there's something,
And so AfriForum are like, so the PBMR, first of all, doesn't have any containment, right? This is one of the design flaws.
So it's
there's nothing. So if you are producing fission products, aka nuclear waste, there's nothing to contain it. So hang on. So there's, why would you be worried about radioactive graphite ending up at the bottom of the vessel? And actually, graphite, isn't that carbon? Carbon doesn't get radioactive, right? So like a lot of those are very good questions.
And no answers?
And what are the answers, right? Well, we do know that there are these fission products that the PBMR produces. Some of them occur because there's now so where does the graphite dust originate? It's because the pebbles start rubbing up against each other's friction, creating graphite dust. But where do all these other substances come from? And so the only conclusion I could draw is that it's a similar process where there's neutron absorption, where because of the fissioning, that you essentially eating the metal. First of all, you created a plant that's got metal that is being irradiated. The minute you start the fission process, and that creates heat, and you can boil water, and you can drive a turbine. Okay, fantastic. Anything hot's fantastic. But for me, this is the mind blowing. Like, I'm just completely blown when someone says to me, you can create substances in the periodic table that didn't exist, like before you started the process. Like you had one part of something on the periodic table was somewhere, and then suddenly created something else, and there's a decay cycle. So there's a process that we don't fully understand, where because of the tendency for anything that starts off as uranium starts decaying when it's fissioning, and you have these fission products which then have a decay cycle. And that decay cycle is measurable. So the conclusion that I came to was that you end up with a slurry of dust, graphite dust, and other fission products at the bottom of the container vessel, and that's why you wouldn't want to invest in a system that you would put your use case, your business case was, we're rolling this out. It's like the next toaster. It's the next microwave oven. Sorry, that is not a workable solution if we don't have a health. Well, so just to give you some insight into some of the health aspects of the prevailing medical model for radiation dose, in terms of the health of what is allowable, is known as LNT. It's the linear no threshold model of radiation exposure, which states that there's no known threshold beyond which radiation should be considered safe.
Okay.
Right?
Because we don't know.
No, it's not that we don't know, is that most of the medical research
Clearly shows it's not safe.
seemed to suggest that beta radiation is when it comes to cells and tissue is not a safe.
And what diseases do those lead to?
Well, here's the thing. So, what happens when you ingest when there's bioaccumulation up the food chain? What happens when you ingest radioactive isotopes? They might not present an immediate problem to your dairy, but if you're drinking the milk, right? It's concentrating into the milk, like the shellfish as well. They're bottom feeders, and this is why heavy metals in our environment. For me, I really wish Earth Life Africa would be more conscientious in looking at problem of metal, whether it's metals on the mines. I mean, there's uranium slurry and radioactive mine dumps where kids are actually playing in radioactive water up in Gauteng, right? I really wish that this organization would be more actively involved in some of these projects that are involved with emissions from industry, the heavy metals. Now, radionuclides are basically fission products that come out of a plant, they accumulate up the food chain and end up in our food. And so why would there be a problem? Well, okay, some of these substances you can piss out, right, if you ingest, but some of these a lot of these substances end up like strontium, or cesium, or it ends up in your radioactive iodine, I think, ends up in your thyroid.
Okay.
Right, your strontium would end up in your cesium, ends up in your bones.
Right? All cancer-prone areas.
Well, it's not that it's producing cancer. It's that what's happening is that you're accumulating into your body over time, right? Because the important thing about radiation, it's not radiation per se. It's radioactivity over time.
I got you.
Right? So over time, so as you're ingesting mercury or whatever it is that over time you're building up a level of toxicity in your body, which could evolve into disease.
I got you.
Right? Because the system's been perturbed.
So this is all linked to AfriForum's suggestion for an alternative energy source.
Yes.
That you're saying is not a good idea on many levels. Practicality, containment, health.
Just containment issues are problematic.
And can that be rolled out? If they keep it within a specific community who can do the containment and the environmental assessments and the health assessments, then yes. But is this a solution for South Africa as a whole?
It's not a solution, because the minute you talk about containment, you're talking about a order of magnitude increase in the costs involved.
Okay.
Right, because then you also need to then deal with the waste product. Like you've got to take it to vault pits. It's got to be in a concrete container for the next 20,000 years. That's a bit scary. The costs involved, and for someone to, this guy Roots, to start talking about, that this is now climate friendly and renewable, and it's going to just be the best thing since sliced bread. And look, I support AfriForum so much as breaking away from government, Metro, Munis.
And there's a solution, some form of solution.
Anyone with a solution right now, I think, is going to get public attention. But let's get back to microgrids and community cooperative.
That was like Science 101 there. It was a lot. I felt like I was in one of the episodes of, what's the program called? It was fun. It was
like
fun.
The dancing, the dancing scientist with the
I know Bill Nye the science guy, and there's also the Big Bang Theory. I felt I was there with the Big Bang
like
Theory.
A Big Bang kind of like.
It's good though. It's good to. I mean, you can't. What I realize as well is that you can't also talk about these topics without having to go into the science. I think what government made a mistake with is that they assume there's a solution, but they don't understand the science. I don't think we need to, ignore the science, or it's something that you have to upskill and understand.
I don't think people are stupid.
Yeah.
Right. I think people, once you talk to them, they will understand what you're saying. Right. It doesn't matter. If I could be talking about rockets, I could talking, astronomy. I could be talking about chemistry. People more or less understand. They've gotten some of the information along the way. They just don't have the full picture.
Okay.
And the government often relies on the fact that you don't know the whole story, that there's a kind of like a broken, like a chain letter, like that game that people play?
Broken telephone.
Broken telephone, yes.
Yeah.
So they kind of, I think a lot of the problems in this country are because of lack of communication, that we talk past each other. We don't check to see whether or not the message got through.
Yeah, but what about the journalists then? For example, I don't know, because I'm talking about media now, right?
And what is media, right? Where are journalists? I think...
Have they done a good job?
No. Journalism in this country is like dead and buried. There's no...
it's gone.
It's gone. There's no investment.
I'm a journalist, by the way. We also have a few other journalists in the studio. So you say is it the journalists, or do you think it's the role of journalism or the system of journalism? Because the education system, I don't think there's a bad school. I think maybe there's a bad system. There's no bad teachers.
Yes.
So is the journalist dead, or is journalism dead?
That's a good question, because if you look at all the what the stats of like newsroom, the juniorization of newsrooms, and the removal, of when you have like editorial, with the centralization of editorial, with there are no individual editors, like you have like a one size fits all. Every newspaper in this country, like literally, they're getting their news from one source, right? Or they're just republishing whether it's Thomson's Reuters or AP, whatever they're getting, they just cut and paste whatever's out there without asking questions, without generating new information. And this issues to do with investigative journalism, which people need to discuss. Why is it that there's certain stories that are open secrets in this country? Whether it's the TRC, whether it's nuclear power. And here's, if I could just give a plug to this problem, because it's related. It's not distantly related, it's quite directly related. We're one of the first countries to unilaterally disarm and end voluntarily our nuclear program.
Yes.
1989. I was looking today to see the date. It was like amazing, because that means like we were ahead of Ukraine. And what do Ukraine and South Africans share in common? Well, Ukraine is another country which unilaterally disarmed itself after it became independent of Mother Russia and the Soviet Union. And for it to end up in this situation where we are now sitting with Russian nukes arriving for war games with SADF in China, what? I didn't buy that ticket. I thought I was living in a country that had a pacifist constitution, that was enabling of human rights, that had environmentalism was Article 24, and there was like, a whole bunch of stuff,
This is all on the record, by the way. And you're saying this because the journalists, like public, don't know.
The public do not know that the history of their own country. You would expect people to celebrate.
Sure.
Yeah, here we go.
I mean, sometimes I feel bad for being a journalist because news is so bad these days that I don't follow it all the time.
Right.
But there's a lot of shit happening in the background, man.
Yes.
Look at that.
Well, that's 2009, right?
That's quite a while back, yeah.
Okay, so I was part of the Food Not Bombs campaign against we had a demonstration against, it wasn't the submarine, it was the aircraft carrier that arrived.
Nantel, just try to search maybe 2022.
It was.
Are there any resources that you can take us to that's maybe a bit more recent? That's out there in the public domain.
No.
Okay.
No, well, look, there are these. So we've got problems with American nukes and Russian nukes and various other superpower countries that come here, and we bootlicking, right? We'll do war games with anyone, because we don't have nuclear bombs like they have, like we don't. The moral position, I think, is the strongest. I think if we stand on our history as a country, right?
There's 1 day ago. Yeah.
All right. This is if you could perhaps bring up the Russian war games exercise that's coming up in
Russian war games exercise.
Yeah, SADF.
Okay, you can continue. We'll put it up
because you don't have to necessarily be a lot of people say, when you say stop the war and please don't invade countries, Russia, people go, but what about United States did something in Libya, and it's like
you can't say that because others are doing the same thing.
Right. For me, I don't see it's a false equivalence, because I would still be opposed to the nukes. If it's the Yankee nukes, I'm still opposed.
Yes.
Right. So for me, there's no safe dose. Look, there is a trend, which isn't the consensus. It might be a trend in France where, according to latest reports, apparently AfriForum says they've embraced linear threshold as a model, which is unfortunate. It's like an academic situation when you decide that a certain amount of radiation is good, right? South Africa, essentially, the policy, even though the medical model is LNT, it's de facto LT is the policy. So the minister disclaims responsibility. You can't get an insurance policy that in the event of a nuclear disaster. So if Kuberg blows up, right? And remember that the longer this system functions, the higher the probability of a disaster. So it was designed for a lifespan of 40 years. So what they're doing, they're replacing the turbines. They're not replacing the containment structures that have been irradiated, and there's also weathering. So there's rebar in that plant that's serious cracks in the containment vessel itself.
Okay.
Right? There's a good case to be made that the plant should be shut down as per the design specifications, said it should be shut down by 2024. And that we're wasting a lot of money refurbishing and creating a white elephant. That money could be better spent on creating an enabling environment for cooperatives, creating an enabling environment for communities, providing us with a community tariff that is separate from the city tariff and separate from the ESCOM tariff, right? It could be, we've spent enough money on the mega coal projects to give literally every household a PV installation, which is crazy, right? We could have created resilience and redundancy, and we could have gone on a demand-side reduction strategies. And this is another thing which we need to talk about in terms of a green New Deal, right? So we want a New Deal. We want to, let's just walk away from the past. Okay, mistakes were made, miscalculations were made. But as what we want to put on the table, what does a Green New Deal imply? The government should assist us as communities, right, to step up, right, that we have systems in place that if part of the grid goes down, our communities have battery backup storage systems, right? And creating a battery backup storage, the big Muizenberg battery could potentially save our community, from the 2 hours of load shedding goes through. Would it recharge for the next? For me, this is okay, so we might be able to save the community one day in a week. Like how long would it take for us to?
For me, it sounds like at the moment if there's a total blackout, then at least we're not totally smashed.
Yeah, so
because at the moment
smashed.
people are saying, look, as long as it's on, it's like it moves from stage 2 to stage 4 to stage 8. It's like it's slowly but surely they're making us get used to it, because even my shopping patterns have changed. I come to that point now where I don't even check the time for load shedding anymore. Right. It's like, in a sense, it's just part of life, because I'm also busy building and I also have a lot of things that's going on. I mean, it must be different for a family. And then also on the socio-economic scale, I think not the poorer you are, but the less fortunate you are, I mean, it affects you more.
Yes.
Whereas in Muizenberg, most people are a bit nestled. Most of the middle class kind of still feel a bit nestled.
Well, there's nothing. I don't have a problem with load shedding per se. Like if it's a couple of hours a week, it's like forcing you to fast, right? I don't have a problem going on a fast.
You want to go hungry?
I don't mind going. Hungry is actually good for you. It's actually proven that fasting increases your lifespan. The problem is when it becomes entrenched, right? Where the entrenched monopoly run by a bunch of protectionists who don't actually care about you. They care about what they're getting out of the system that they're milking. Right?
And it's still not benefiting us at all.
It's not benefiting us. So the 31 billion rand bailout that went into Eskom's balance sheet in 2021, right, came out of the taxpayers' coffers, and yet we were still hit with an 18% increase. We've gone down the road of per annum 18% increases.
It's huge.
Every year.
It's huge.
Like it's not just one increase, it's next year's increase, it's the year after and the year after. What have we done to deserve this?
David, can I just ask you something, man?
Yes.
What is your opinion on the announcement that Biden made a couple of months ago about the Green Deal that he's enforcing? Okay, let me not use the word enforce, that he's introducing from a political point of view, and will it solve our problem?
Well, America's an interesting case because I've got some stats on cooperatives in America. They've got like a 42% of the installation of cables in that country owned by communities, over 800 cooperatives. So there's a lot of community energy in America.
42% of their national energy grid.
The whole system is literally
massive.
That's a massive amount. And Germany's is similar, right? Over 800 cooperatives. UK is 400. So when you raise the issue of like the Biden administration and the Republicans and the Democrats, I'm not actually interested. I'm interested in cooperatives are your community, not your state or your province or your country. So when you start thinking local and acting global. So if I'm an environmentalist and I'm trying to solve a problem of global climate change, it makes no sense for me to get on the global stage to try and lecture other people in other countries of what to do. What I should be doing is looking at my community. So I'm very much looking at solving our immediate issue in Muizenberg, which is this. It was 2 hours, two slots of 4 hours a day, and then became 6 hours a day, and then it was 8 hours, and then hang on. At what point does the whole community fabric break down? Because you got little grannies sitting in flats
Sure. Are they affected the most?
Think about it, right? So your youth are able to adapt.
Go
by
outside.
nature. Your youth are able to adapt. They're not affected. It's your couples, your families, your mamas and papas, and your old, gogos and
Because
grannies.
they can't see and they can't walk.
When they're sitting there in the dark and their phones can't go on, and so it becomes like this rolling, compounding system of problems where you can't solve one problem because there's too many problems. So like where do you start? You've got a whole bunch of problems. So the family's fabric structure, the structure of our community is breaking down, like in front of my eyes.
Sure.
Right? It's become what I've noticed. So it's like first it was COVID.
Sure.
It was like the lockdowns that hit us. So it was like a closure of the commons. It was an end of the social circus. It was like a reduction in gigs, for instance. Like being a musician in a system that's crumbling. Like musicians by nature aren't, it's like they're not scientists. They're not researchers. They're making music and they want to focus on their music. And all of a sudden you've got a system that's like forcing you to, unfortunately, guys, you signed up for this. It's the future. We all have to learn how to solder our own batteries. That's the way. It's a hacker future. We got to hack our way out of the system. And that's the crisis that I'm rising to fix a system using a hack, right? Let's take a project, electronic project off the internet. There are a couple of them. Let's build it. Okay. Let's do it.
We spoke problem. We spoke about the solution. We also spoke about a lot of background and politics and what's happening on the global scale. If you could, is it fair for me to ask a time frame for how your project in particular in Muizenberg, our use case is going to be implemented, as well as a couple of the steps that we're going to go through over the next couple of weeks in particular? Because look, you started the movement, went on to social media, created a Facebook page.
Yes.
We had our first meeting. Wasn't the great attendance, but then we managed to get information out there. We got an article published, and now we're on a media platform, and a lot of people are going to hear about it now. So we have momentum. Without that momentum, it's very difficult. What do you foresee? Would you be able to play God for a couple of minutes and just tell me what's happening next?
I used to do the whole deity kind of thing,
Yes.
try to play God.
Not play God, but just maybe give us a...
Look, so here's a time frame. It's literally, it's on a needs-based level. It's like there are needs and things that we need to do in order to get to our vision. If you love what we're doing, then please sign up.
Okay.
Join the Muizenberg, join the wiki page, join the group. Start communicating. Start talking amongst yourselves. Things that you can do that are like start collecting 18650 batteries, like battery packs, right? Sign up to the build so we can order the PCBs. Start talking about the projects that we showcase.
Come to the meetings.
Come to the meetings. You don't have to necessarily be in person. You can Zoom.
So we're busy putting all that into place now.
Yeah, get on the chat.
And everyone can join. If you're a tech person, you can assist us with the tech. If you are a media person, get us onto, there's always something that everyone can do.
And remember that how we got out of apartheid was we silk screened our t-shirts.
Say again?
Literally. No, what I'm saying is how we got, how we, it was like how the grassroots like revolt against the system that just became this rolling mass act. Like to call it mass action, it was mass conclusion, right? The rolling mass conclusion occurred, which was that democracy was unstoppable.
Okay.
There were no other choices. So that was the choice of the nation that we made.
So our democracy is a corporation?
Mass corporation. It was a result of a incredible energy.
And what are the elements of that corporation? Where are we now at this point? Now going live, a few hundred people at least listening to this, a few thousand people seeing the article in the People's Post. What is the...
If this generation doesn't do it, you are the generation of today.
Okay.
Right? If you fail, it's done. It's gone.
Okay. When you say you mean me as the younger generation?
Yes, the younger generation. It's like this is the generation of today, right? This generation has an opportunity to maybe fix some of the mistakes of the past and to assist in its time of need.
Okay.
But if we blow it, it's blown. Right? There won't be any coming back from it because it's a spiral of compounding disasters. It's like the COVID disaster, followed by economic disasters, followed by global political disasters.
And they all perpetuate each other.
Everything just starts feeding in on itself, and we start becoming negative South Africans once again. It's like we were at one point very positive people, proud people. We were very, very much like a guiding light for the rest of the world, right? And the whole world at the moment is in quite dire straits, right? Because we've sort of had 2 decades, literally, of the rest of the world had an economic boom, right? It was like a double boom, and then suddenly there was like a slump, right? And as a result of the war, so that people kind of fell off their pedestals, and so there's a lot of negativity out there, and we've got to correct it. And the way to do it is go back to your community, talk to your brothers and sisters, right? I'm not demanding that you do as I do and create the same solutions, but think about it. Think about what can be done. That there can, if we try to get some of that energy back, right? Literally, put some volts
back into the system,
back in,
onto the grid.
I don't know what the difference between a joule and a coulomb is. Right? I'm sure there are engineers out there.
Me too.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. So all I know is to put a battery in series or parallel, right? Like what happens when you do that? For me, it's like, okay, let's walk this path together. I'm going to build my home battery project, and I'm hoping everyone else will, and we report back. Say, okay, how did it go? What happens if we build a bigger pack? What happens if we start building community batteries? And then we start getting these renewable sources of energy, whether it's your wind energy, whether it's your, the thing is not just photovoltaics. It's there's oscillating wind systems. There's so many other like thermal Like
the only
we
way
talk
we can
about
actually
energy, sources of energy.
The only way what I can hear, what I feel, and what I'm starting to realize now. In the first meeting, I was looking more at this is the solution. I was like, ooh, my attention was more on that. It's not necessarily that is one part of the solution. Once you encourage other cooperatives and you have the mentality that when we come together and we do something, that something can get done, and we start feeding off the collective cooperative consciousnness that something can be done. I'm sure when the first few cooperatives were started in the US and in the UK and other countries around the world, that it was tough.
Yeah.
But just because
You
they
got-
came together and they did something, they started sharing ideas.
Yes.
And it started taking off from there.
Right,
So
so
you're
you-
not just saying that's my system
Yes.
and that's what we need to implement. You're saying start. You want to birth it, be that spark.
Don't waste a crisis. Right? Don't waste a crisis. The crisis is a great learning experience. Some of the best times.
Oh,
actually,
wow.
Right?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like you're gonna love this crisis, because if it means that we've got to actually build it ourselves, then you're gonna pick up skills and you're gonna educate yourself. And you're gonna actually decouple from the mainstream system that got us here.
Wow.
That's a system that failed. Don't get lied to. I mean, people, they hang on. It's a failure, but they're still actually wrapping it up as if it was like that. That was the most success they were intending all along, right? Was to switch us off. And it's the city switched me off. It's not Eskom. It was the city that switched me off. But no, hang on, they're working on the problem, right? I don't have time to wait for the mayor of the city to come along with his volts to power my cell phone. I need the volts like yesterday. Right, and I can't do it if everyone, it's one of these, we're interconnected, right? It's just one of those things. It seems as it doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank, you're still stuck with a problem that you're interconnected, and there's always going to be a deficit. There's always going to be liability. There's something that you lack, right? And if you don't create networks that are resilient and reach out when you truly need to reach out. Right, and now's the time to reach out, and let's work on a battery project, because let's just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
That we know we can do.
Yes.
Right, because we know how batteries work. We know how to pack a battery, and we know we can get at least 12 volts.
I got you.
And we start producing 12 volt modules. We can produce a lot of energy that we can store, whether it's city, we buy it from the city, okay. But what if we started producing our own energy? That's the next episode. It's like, okay, maybe someone's going to come up with a better way to generate energy.
We're coming towards the end of the show, and normally when we end the show, we try to end it by giving some form of like hope. And I mean, the whole show you were giving solution, and the last, chat, the last piece of information you gave was very, very optimistic. For the people out there that are going through load shedding, that are struggling because of it, that kind of feel in a sense a little bit hopeless, what message do you have, for them? Maybe something direct, just a piece of your heart, as a father, as someone who has seen this coming for the last 30 years.
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't do this sooner. I'm sorry that I was that I actually bought into some of that just like disillusion.
Sure.
I kind of walked away, but I'm back, and cooperatives are reaching out. They're going to come to your door. Like at some point, you'll see a co-op
Come up
in your neighborhood. And if you feel the need to start your own co-op in your community, please just do it. Get a WhatsApp group together. You don't have to be in Muizenberg. You can be anywhere in South Africa. So it's just in my community. We that's what we're doing. Please, if there's something that you're doing that's in another community, you can just drop us a line, send us a link, come to our meetings. Even we can. The cool thing about cooperatives is that they can federate. Right, you can have one cooperative, and we start federating. We send ambassadors.
Wow,
we create our local community vibes. Have our concerts. Have our bring the yoga and the music together, and and the hackerspace.
Yes.
Right? We get the Tronics up and running, and that's what's missing for me in the mix. In South Africa, we're slightly behind, but we can catch up. We can do it.
I think we're going to leave it at that.
Cool.
David, thank you so much for joining us on Cape Conscious Media. If anyone out there would like to contact David, you can contact him through our Facebook page. You can let us, myself and Nantel, know. And can we make your information publicly available, David? How do they reach you?
I'm generally on the net, like a netizen.
Okay, you're on Facebook, right?
Yeah, I hate talking about it, but my face is there. That thing that happened. Look, we can create our own social media if you want. Muizenberg.co, that's a good way to get hold of me.
Okay,
so I'd rather plug. The problem of when a person says Facebook, you immediately pushing Mark Zuckerberg's like Meta platform, right?
I got you.
So problem of platforming. Think about where we're putting our energy. Take some of that energy back, put it into local networks.
Nice.
Mesh networks. I could. That's like something else that we could talk about, but not today.
I'm happy I asked if they should reach you through Facebook, because now, through my ignorance in inverted commas, we have another sort of solution.
We could build you a webpage if you need.
Fantastic. Also, there was an article published by a fantastic journalist from the area, name is Natasha Bezedinot, and it was published on News 24 online, People's Post. So if everyone wants to learn a bit more or read that article, I would suggest you do. It's a fantastic piece of writing. That was Cape Conscious Media. Everyone out there, have a fantastic evening, and thank you so much for joining our podcast.